And I've thought for a long time that the opposite of fear, was courage. I always thought the opposite of fear is courage. But the longer I live, the older I get. Birthday's coming up way too fast. I've just come to the realization that I believe the opposite of fear is trust.
Welcome to Living Out 180, a podcast from 180 Church where we talk about faith, leadership, and everyday life. We'd like to welcome you to the podcast today. I'm your host, Kendall Terry, and I have my co-host back with me today.
I have returned
Brad
from the
Brian.
banishment.
The banishment. That's great. There's been a lot going on.
There has been a lot going on.
And so it was probably nice last week. You probably, I know you say you enjoyed recording the podcast, but you probably also enjoyed me not texting you about we need a time.
Well, what was interesting is my wife was gone, so I probably had more time than any other time, but I was banished. Yeah. So I guess it was self-banishment.
Maybe.
Since I had Dylan preach for me.
That's right.
That was self-banishment.
That's good. No, I thought Dylan last week did a fantastic job with the podcast. And,
yes.
His message that he put together in James chapter 1, I thought was very good. It was a lot of great stuff in there, and it was even hard to get through. He struggled getting through it in the Sunday morning message.
Yes,
we got through, I think, a good bit of it in the podcast, but it was even tough there just because there was so much good stuff in James chapter 1.
A lot of information.
And this week we are starting a new series called Go to Battle.
Yes, we're talking about battles that everyone faces. The first three, because we've already gotten through two of them, and I'm already preparing for the third one: fear, discouragement, and worry. And then after that, I'm going to be talking about anger and temptation. And so there's all of these things that we battle, honestly, regularly sometimes. Yeah. Today we're talking about fear, and in this idea of fear is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually I said in the message, it's a basic survival instinct. It can protect us, but if it becomes irrational, then it will start controlling our decisions, and it puts us in a really bad place in what God has for us. Yeah. And so I think understanding how to battle these things, fear, like I said, fear, discouragement, worry, those are the first three, is incredibly important to us.
And this message was focusing on Deuteronomy chapter 1.
Yes.
And looking at fear. And there's been times in my life where God has checked me on that of, if you weren't afraid, what would you do?
Right.
When I was in college, I had an opportunity to go to China on a trip, and we were going to be working in a university, and it was I had never been out of the country before. I'd never even thought about doing something like that, and the opportunity came up, and I was praying about it, and I remember that being one of the discussion points that somebody had come that I was talking through it with, and they said, well, if you weren't afraid, would you go?
Right.
That's a tough response back, because I was not necessarily looking at it through that lens of fear, but there were all of these things. I had never flown on a plane that far. I had never been that far away from home. I'd never been out of the country. I mean, legitimately, I didn't even have a passport at that point, because the time I had been out of the country was in Mexico and in Canada, whenever you just go across the border, and you didn't need passports at that time to do that. And it was like, there were so many things of, well, you don't have this, or you don't have that, and the person I was talking to just kind of boiled it down to what it really was, well, if you weren't afraid, would you go? Yeah, I probably would. And
even that idea, if we were to look back, if we weren't afraid, what would we have not missed out on? Like, what is that fear keeping us from? Like, what are we missing out on? Not a FOMO situation,
right?
But fear of something else that causes us to miss out on something that maybe God has for us. Maybe it's just something that we would enjoy. That's the idea of trying to manage. We're talking about going to battle, but honestly managing something that everybody has, everybody has fear at some level. Some of it's probably just, they're in denial. They don't think they have fear. But again, like you just said, you ask those questions and you kind of boil it down. If you continue asking the why questions.
Yeah.
Okay, but why is that? Okay, but why is that? At some point it probably will come. I'm just really afraid.
Right. And in the business sense, I was looking at some statistics the other day I had never looked at before. And the majority of people that start their own company, do you know how old they are?
Oh, they got to be in their 40s?
47.
Yeah.
47 is the average age for somebody that starts their own company. Now, some of that's because they have done a job for someone else for X amount of years, and they finally got some experience, and they feel like they have confidence to do that. But it's, mid 40s, they start thinking about that, and some of that may be, you could say midlife crisis or whatever. They're thinking about doing something different or something. But when you start looking at that of like, well, what causes them to not do that before then? And it's a lot of it comes down to fear. Well, I've got to be able to pay this bill. What if that doesn't work? What if this email doesn't land? What if the person doesn't respond properly?
I've got enough backup plans at 47 that I can fail and not be a failure.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
And so they don't mind taking the risk too of okay, their kids maybe a little bit older, or maybe they're finally out of the house by the time you're getting, late 40s, early 50s. Most of the time your kids are more into adulthood. And for most of us, I know some people had kids later, but, and so it's just that there's a lot of things that do come down to that. Well, what happens if I send this email and take this risk?
Right.
Take this leap. What if I do put my name out there for that thing or that opportunity? And a lot of times it's that the fear of the what if, the fear of the unknown, that what might happen keeps you from even taking that step. And sometimes, just like we see in Deuteronomy, of God's people were standing at the edge of the promised land, right? I mean, that trip from Egypt to Israel should not have taken 40 years.
No, I mean, they got there.
They got
there in 12 months.
To move that many people that far, they got there. It took to say a year. I mean, they had things. They had cattle. They had sheep. They had goats. They had all this stuff. It was a large group of people. So to say it took them a year to get there. Okay, and they get there, and I think it's amazing. They send people across into the promised land, and when you read it, they come back and they say, "This is a land flowing with milk and honey." The fruit takes 2 people to carry the cluster of grapes, and then all of a sudden it was the descendants of. I'm drawing a blank on the name they used, but the descendants, in essence, of giants and the people they've got large walls, they've got fortified cities, and all of a sudden 10 of the 12 people that went into the land go,
they would just bow out.
Yeah, we can't win this. Now, the wild thing about that whole thing, and I know we've got whole points to get to, but the wild thing for me in this is these are the same people. We're not talking about, like, I get it. If you're talking to me about my great-grandparents have done this and they lived through the Great Depression, they lived through, to say, well, your descendants did this and now you're facing this and you can't. No, these are the individuals that walked out of Egypt.
Correct.
These are the individuals that watched Moses stand in front of the Red Sea and the thing parted. They have watched water come out of rocks. They've watched manna come down from heaven. All of these things have happened where they have seen God show up in mighty ways.
Yep. And
they're standing there on what is another impossible thing, and 10 of them immediately are, we're out. This ain't going to end well.
And ultimately what you're saying is God can't do it.
You're right.
Because he was the one saying it.
Yeah.
And that's the part that is difficult for us to wrestle with, in my opinion, is God is specifically showing them the plan. Like this is not for us where I go in my prayer closet and I need God to speak to me through his word, or I need him to speak to me through his spirit. He's talking to him.
Right.
he's telling them, like he's telling Moses, and everything, and this is the other thing, everything Moses said is happening.
Yes.
Moses holds a staff out, the Red Sea part you just said, all of these things. And he's showing up in a cloud and fire every day. And he said, go take the land. And they're like, okay, we should scout it out first.
Right.
And it's almost as if that was the beginning of them getting involved. That's the way I look at it, is them sending scouts was the beginning of the children of Israel getting involved and saying, I need to see for myself, nowhere else. And it was because they were so close to Egypt. It's like, we need to cross the Red Sea. You turn, look over your shoulder, you see the Egyptians coming. Yeah, we need to cross the Red Sea. Right. Let's go. Then nobody sent a scout into the Red Sea.
That's right.
Because they were being chased. And so now, and we could do this in business. We can do this with family. We can do this with spiritual things. Now, nobody's chasing them. And so there's not a desperation. There's not an urgency. That's the word. I love the word. I try to live by the word of urgency. Yeah. There's no urgency. So let's send in a scout.
And that is, like you were saying, in business, there is a big transition that has to take in a company to go from a startup.
Yep.
When it's, okay, I've got to get out here and do this.
Like, we got to eat next week.
Right. I got to show up and work, and I got to make sure this thing is successful. And you get into that about 10 years in. I know it's like 10 years is a long time, but 10 years, typically that's where a startup switches from being a startup to being a sustainable company. And at that point, either they have been so successful as a startup that someone else comes in and buys them, or they have to transition this thing into a sustainable model where they're no longer able to make decisions based on being a startup. Now they're established. And when you're established, the problem is exactly the same as you just described it. Now, what happens if we fail? Look at all these people that are relying on us to feed their family.
Yeah.
Look at all these people that are needing us to make this, to be able to turn the lights on, to be able to do whatever it is that we're doing. And now the decision-making changes from, we used to all just come together and make this happen because we were all needing to feed our families,
right,
to, oh, as a leader now, I'm making decisions that drastically impacts people's lives. There's people now relying on me, and that can cause you to change in the way you make a decision.
I remember Pastor Ronnie making a statement when we were growing and things were just, almost getting out from under us. They were growing so fast. I remember him saying one day in a moment of transparency, he said, a part of me wants to go find a little community in the middle of the woods in Middle Tennessee and pastor 10 or 15 people, 4 or 5 families.
Yeah.
He said, and just do that till it's time to go be with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I get it. And that is that exact tension that we're talking about. Do we take a step so we can serve more, do more, be more? Or do we just say, this is it?
Right.
God got us out of Egypt. That was enough. But that's the thing. That's the thing that fear does, is it's not just let's stay in the wilderness and we'll be okay. It's, why don't we just go back to Egypt?
They said it multiple times.
Yeah, look, we were better off in Egypt. And it's like, you don't remember Egypt. It's like, we were at Rio Central, we were in a tent for a year and a half. And when we started our church, we were at Heritage High School for a year. And every Sunday morning, we had to get there super early to set everything up, kids area, nursery, sanctuary, which was the theater at the time. We had to set up our sound system. We had to set up all of our stuff. And then when it was over, we had to take all that down and put it, we had a storage bin.
Yeah.
We had one of those storage bins, and we would put everything in it, and then we would leave, an hour afterwards. And I remember going, when we moved to Montville Station, just taking this breath like, oh. And within just a few weeks, I remember the first person that said, man, I kind of miss the school. And I said, no, you don't. And they were like, what? And I said, the reason you miss the school is I never saw you early and I never saw you stay late. You miss the idea of school. they didn't miss being a slave. They missed the idea of not having to work and not having to do anything and just waking up every day and having somebody tell them what to do.
Right.
And now, just like us with our kids, now God has this bigger plan, and it involves them doing something.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, plan's not coming to pass.
And I think we've already been talking about it, but that's kind of that first point of fear disregards God's plan, because there are clear plans here. And I think, Habakkuk says to write the vision down, make it plain, make it clear so that others can run with it. And I think that's a big thing that many times when you're on that kind of decision-making line of you've got to make some things clear sometimes to yourself, to your spouse, to your family, to those around you of, it's kind of that business model, but what's the plan here?
Yeah.
And then when fear starts to say, well, what if they don't respond to that email? What if the funding doesn't come immediately to you? What if I've got to go back to that vision of what is this thing that we were wanting to do? And why were we wanting to do it? What was the plan? What's going on here? And that's that same thing with the children of Israel. They're standing on the precipice of the plan.
Yeah.
The whole reason, the thing that Moses has been saying to them from the time they were in Egypt, if God has a plan for us flowing with milk and honey, God has a space, God has the land that is ours that we're supposed to have. And in the middle of that, they get on the edge. And like you said, the point that they go, well, let's send some spies over there and check it out and see if this is what God has planned.
Right.
Instead of saying, God is leading us still with a cloud by day and fire by night. If God is saying, let's go, why aren't we going? And instead they say, well, let's see let's see what's over there. And I think you also have this transition of they were slaves in Egypt. They went out into the wilderness and they were wanderers. And now they were going to have to transition into being warriors.
Yes.
And they forgot that the thing that caused them to go from slaves to wanderers was God.
Yep.
And if they needed to go from wanderer to warrior, God could do that too.
I remember having some hesitation over the last several months. I didn't tell too many people about it, but moms know. And I remember being at my mom's house, and she said, how are you feeling about, whatever. And I was just being half honest with her. And she looked at me and she said, I sense hesitation. She said, I guess you need to ask yourself a question. And that is, 1, did you hear from God? And 2, did he change his mind? And I think that, and that really made me sit down for a minute and think about, okay. And she said, it's okay if you don't think you heard from him.
Yeah.
She said, but if you heard from him, and she was very matter of fact. She said, but if you heard from him, he hasn't changed his mind. I don't know why you would. And I think that's kind of this idea. Moses is telling them, guys, what I wish Moses would say is, guys, I know you want to scout it out, but God said to go. Let's just go.
He's done everything else that we've asked.
Let's just go.
And I think that's, maybe that started to plant that seed in Moses's life as well. He gets into some stuff as well that keeps him from the promised land down the road. Right. Some of that anger and frustration
dealing with people.
I can't imagine in Moses' situation with the amount of times that the children of Israel were, we brought you out of the land of Egypt where you were slaves, and they said, let's just go back to Egypt. Yeah. I know God's done all of these other things. Let's just go back to Egypt. And I think that's also the fear will creep in and cause us to remember the past differently than what it was.
Yes. No question.
And I was in the second tent at Rio whenever I was a youth pastor there. You guys had the first one. I helped build the second one and was in it. And I will tell you, as many as people want to glorify the tent days,
that's garbage.
I remember sitting in a service going, I'm going to pass out just from the heat. Like, there is no air flowing, and it didn't matter they had fans blowing or not. It was hot, and it was uncomfortable, and it was not. I'm like, okay, yeah, we can talk about some great things that happened when we went into the tent, and there was, population, explosion again in the amount of people coming and all this, but it was a lot of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That fear will cause you to forget that stuff and go, let's go back to what we know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it not only, so it not only stops, not really stops, the word is disregard. It causes us to kind of ignore God's plan. It also puts us in this position where we forget the purpose that God has for us.
Yeah.
And for me today, and for you today, for any person listening that's a believer, your purpose is to bring people to Christ.
Yeah.
That's your purpose. He's going to give you different vehicles, and I believe that he can work in different vehicles to do that. But that's the purpose. The purpose for the children of Israel were to go to the land that he was promised and multiply and become a great nation.
Yeah.
And so this wild idea of them saying, I don't think we can do this, it was actually completely distorting the whole purpose that God had, the reason he had rescued them.
Right.
Which was to, let's go out, let's do some great things. And they're like, let's just go back.
Let's go back. It blows my mind when you're reading this process that they were in, because of how many times they don't get their way and they go, you brought us out here just to kill us.
Mm-hmm.
You brought us out of the land of Egypt just to kill us out here in the desert. And they easily forgot. And I think fear causes quick forgetting of all of the things that God had already done. Yeah. Like I said, I have never seen waters just part out of, I've been around a lot of lakes. I've been around a lot of rivers and streams. I've never seen waters part. And then the ground immediately is dry for me to walk across on, which it says happened.
Yeah.
Not just that the waters parted, but that the ground was dry for them to walk across. I've never seen that. I like to think that if I saw God do that kind of thing, I'd be set.
You would think so.
And then they get out there and they're like, we don't have any food to eat. And God is dropping stuff on the ground that they don't even know what it's called.
Daily.
We say it's manna, but when you look at the translation of manna, what is it?
Yeah.
It's manna. Mm-hmm. Daily. Then they talk about not having meat, and God starts dropping pheasants for them to eat. Like, he is providing these amazing miracles regularly for them. And they're watching Moses go up on mountains that the clouds cover, and they hear the very voice of God speaking to Moses, and they see the amazing power and the image. All of this happening, and then they're sitting there on the edge of the reason they left Egypt, and they go, let's just go back to Egypt.
And it's kind of this idea, you said it earlier, you touched on it. It's almost like, I think was it Roger Clemens that talked about misremembering during one of his trials. Anyway, they start, for some reason, they're remembering the past much differently than what it was. One of the exercises that Tammy and I used to do when she worked, and we would kind of hold each other accountable anytime we would begin to kind of grumble about where we were, about the job, about going to work, whatever. Not just the daily, hey, I'm tired, I don't want to go. Right. But when we sensed each other would be serious, I remember asking her, what do you think 5 years ago, if I told you 5 years ago where you would be today, what would you think about it?
Yeah.
If I told you the job, the pay, the position, the promotion, all those things, if I told you all of that 5 years ago, hey, 5 years from now, you're going to be here, what would your response be? And that was the thing we would constantly talk about. Oh, man, we would think we would have arrived.
Yeah.
I've even asked people, the job you have now, do you remember the person you were and the thoughts you had before you got this job? Like when you applied for this job, whatever this job is, for anybody listening, whatever it is, do you remember wanting that job? You need to find a way to remember what that was like. I used to speak a lot to law enforcement, and I would constantly ask them, what is your why?
Yep.
because your why, when you first started doing this job, you had a vision, you had excitement, you wanted to do it. And now it's just living the dream.
Right.
And you've forgotten the why. That's what fear does, in my opinion.
Yep.
It will cause us to forget the why, and it will cause us to kind of begin to pull back. Say, I don't know that we can do this.
Well, and not only just, we talked about the plan, looking at that purpose as well, of God is doing something right now in you to get you to the next thing that he's got for you.
Yeah.
And that is the children of Israel standing on that edge. And like I said, they were wanderers at that point. God had changed them from slaves to wanderers in the desert. And now he's getting ready to change them again into warriors. And we don't even know how many of those battles God wasn't just going to fight for them. I mean,
Right.
we've got examples of that he did do that as well. Mm-hmm. So we don't even know how much they would have had to actually lift a sword even.
Yeah.
If they would have taken that first step. We know what it was like when Joshua led them in, but that was 40 years later in a different group of people in a different setting. If they would have just had that confidence to walk at that point, but when they got to that point of seeing growth and seeing change and seeing, I may have to start doing something different. I'm used to, I went from being a slave, and now I have my own tent. I have my own things. I have my own herd. I have my own jewelry.
Nobody's chasing me.
Nobody's chasing me anymore. I've got this. Now you're telling me I have to leave that and change into something else. Sometimes God is changing you. And that's the thing that my wife and I have gotten to multiple times as stuff has happened in our life of, for whatever reason, God has us here in this moment right now.
Yep.
I need to let God grow me.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be uncomfortable. Growth is always uncomfortable.
Yes.
That's why very few people are saying they want to go back to middle school. Why? Because there's so much growth happening. There's physical growth, there's mental growth, there's reproductive growth. Like all these things are happening, and it messes everybody up. And you go, I don't ever want to go back to that again. I want to get through that to a time when life started to make sense again. And we go through that in our own lives. God has us on the opportunity for growth, to be different, and fear distorts that purpose of our life and says, well, you were really comfortable over here. Mm-hmm. It'd be really nice if you just kept doing this over here, but I can't get to what God is calling me to if I stay here.
And the next part of that is so important for families, for teams, for businesses. And that is, fear is rarely just a one-person problem. I studied this, and I don't really read what happened, but I know what happened. It's that these 10 people that came back really excited started having to tell other people, what did you see? And they started telling them, and they started seeing in their face, what?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, the promise and the purpose that we're supposed to go, we're not seeing it as big as the problem.
Yeah.
We're just seeing the problem. And then we start having all these conversations, and it's contagious.
100%.
The discouragement that takes place within the people is so contagious that it's not contained. And as many people as are listening to the problems that they're about to face, it just begins to swell. Mm-hmm. And now it's not just one or two people, it's a whole tribe. And it eventually becomes 10 tribes that says, this is too much. I mean, the ground will devour us when we go over there. That's what they say. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. But no, that's what they say. It's going to be too much. We just can't do it.
Because fear will spread in a group. And we see this over and over.
Like wildfire.
You get a group of people around, and it's hard to keep them positive. They can go negative so fast.
Oh, yeah.
They go to all of the what ifs. They go to all of and you've got to stop sometimes in decision making. You've got to stop sometimes and go, okay, yes, it's good to put stuff out there on the table. We need to know what we're walking into. But we can't now make a decision on the worst case scenario.
No.
And that's what the children of Israel did, right?
Yeah.
When they heard the report, because when the report starts, it says the land it's exactly what God has promised. It's flowing with milk and honey. It has this kind of vineyards. It has this kind of and then it starts to switch, and the people begin to hang on to they don't go, well, you've just said this is exactly what God has promised. That's what you were supposed to go find out, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to go find out, is this the land that God had promised? Yes, there are some people there that we're going to have to interact with, that we're going to have to deal with. And all of a sudden now, because it wasn't just a perfect scenario, then now it's, well, are we sure about this, guys? We can't do this. And like you said, they start to even make up the ground's going to swallow us.
Yeah.
When we go, what?
Yeah. And so we have this environment of fear. And there are families, currently I'm sure, that have environments of fear. I was so fortunate and blessed, and I'll use both of those terms, when I was growing up, to have parents that didn't allow me to operate out of fear. Because anytime I would say, I think I want to try this, my parents were good. And I may have said this before already, but they were like, go for it. And I have no question in my mind that there were times when they laid down to go to sleep at night, laying on their pillows, they were like, he's going to fall on his face, right? Like, this is not a good idea. But they were so encouraging of don't be afraid of it. Go ahead and try. I mean, I come from the generation they tell you how to swim by throwing you in the water. So obviously it wasn't, fear. My son-in-law's favorite statement is trauma teaches. And I think my entire family grew up on that. But what we don't want to happen, and that's why talking about this is so important, we don't want to create environments of discouragement. We don't want to allow fear to discourage us from doing those things. There's so many other things we could do.
And I grew up in a very similar setting. Whenever I decided I'd went to college, my parents had moved us before I graduated high school, and we were near a major university at that point. And my dad, he goes, hey, I saw some things your brother had to learn the hard way when you went to college. So you can commute to college and get that first year under you, and let's see how this goes, and you'll have some more support and that sort of thing. And so we did that, and I remember getting to that summer, and I had really felt like God was dealing with me about changing schools and different things. And I remember I was afraid to go talk to my parents about this, and I went and sat down with my dad and mom and said, I this opportunity's come up. I really think I want to do this. And that was their response. They were like, this sounds great. Like, let's do this. Now, that's not how my dad, my mom would tell me. My dad, he fell apart whenever I left for college. She was like, I really thought I would have a harder time. And your dad was the one that every time we turned around, she was like, I had to tell him, like, you got to suck it up. Like, you got to pull it back together. But they were in my face, they were encouraging, and this is going to be great. If they would have come back with there's too many unknowns here, I would have had to question then whether this is something I should have done. But I had parents that were there. You've got to find those support elements to say, you're thinking about this, let's pray about it. And if you really feel like this is a God thing, like, let's hold on to that promise, which is the other thing, because fear causes us to then doubt the promise. We started this with the plan, which is the promise, but we started with the plan. We said, we got to make it clear. We got to make it known, because when you start going through these things and you start seeing the what ifs, you start seeing worst case scenarios, you start showing, well, this thing could all fall apart. You've got to be able to hold on to the promise and say, God, if this is your promise, which is what the children of Israel, for some reason, didn't do here, is to say, God, this was your promise. It's exactly what you said it was going to be. Instead, they said, well, God, you left out the fact that there are people living there. Right. Yep. And we've got fear causes you then to go, well, maybe it wasn't God's promise. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's not what God wanted us to be.
And I've thought for a long time that the opposite of fear, was courage. I always thought the opposite of fear is courage. But the longer I live, the older I get. Birthday's coming up way too fast. I've just come to the realization that I believe the opposite of fear is trust. Even when I'm not real sure, I want to be able to trust God. And as I trust him, that causes me to again believe his promises. Because we're talking about if it fear causes us to doubt the promises of God. I think the opposite of that is let's trust the promises of God. And one of the reasons that I think that we can trust his promises is, when we think about, again, we're going through this list, not only does fear cause us to doubt his promises, but it also will cause us to just completely ignore his principles.
Right.
And his principles are pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
What he said, I wanted to read this, and then we can talk about it. But I know we're cutting time, and I want to get to the good part. In my opinion, the best part is how we battle.
That's right.
But Deuteronomy 1:26 says, "You were unwilling to go up, and you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God." You had a mandate. Mm-hmm. You had marching orders. And because you were afraid, you completely ignored all of those things that God had for you. And for some reason, you just went into rebellion. That's pretty strong.
That is. And, whenever you look at the very basis of sin is rebellion. Mm-hmm. Sin is going against the thing that, James lays it out, that if you know to do good and don't do it, that's sin. That's what, we say the definition, missing the mark and all this. It's you have the plan here. And sometimes we don't think about it in that way of saying, well, it's sin if I don't do what God's plan is for my life. But if I know to do what God's wanting me to do and I don't do it,
right,
God looks at that as rebellion against him then. Mm-hmm. And he said it very clearly to the children of Israel. Yeah. He said, because there are consequences now. Is that not what sin is? Sin is the thing that drives us from God, that keeps us from getting the thing that God wants us to have.
But in the world we live in today, we don't talk about sin anyway.
Right.
And so to put it in such egregious terms that rebellion is sin goes against how we feel. Mm-hmm. We don't feel sinful. That's just the world that we live in, and it's wrong. It's put us in a bad situation.
Right.
But that's what fear does, is it puts us in this area that God has a purpose, a plan. He has all these things, and there are principles. If we'll follow them, then we can trust that God's going to do it. But what fear does is says, God, I just don't believe you'll come through this time.
Right.
And so with all of those things that fear does, one of the most important things, and this has been the battle for me personally in these messages, is giving the right amount of time to each of these things. We talked about fear for, I don't know how long we've been talking. We've been talking about fear for a minute.
Yeah.
But I really want to talk about how we go to battle with fear.
Absolutely.
And that first one is confront your fear honestly.
Right. I know you pulled out Psalms 139 that says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." That's allowing God to do something and to say, God, I'm not, you know me. You created me as a human. You created me with worry and doubt and fear and anxiety and all of those things. And so you know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Let's put it out here and be plain. God, I'm afraid to take this step. Yeah. I'm afraid to do this next thing. I know the promises that you have spoken over my life. Mm-hmm. I know where you're saying I'm going. And I'm afraid, all of the what ifs and all of the family things and all of the distance and all of that is now playing into the decision. God, you know this. Mm-hmm. And being plain and getting it out there honestly before God. We hide things from God like he doesn't know.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. We're not being honest so that God now knows.
Right.
We're being honest so that we are admitting that this is an issue. Yeah. This is an issue for me. And I have been a very strong advocate that things sound differently going into my ears than they do when they just stay in my head. Mm-hmm. So when I say it out loud, I'm also hearing it. And therefore it makes me kind of stop for a minute and go, oh, okay. And once I can admit it, then I need to have a serious conversation with God and say, where do I need to go next?
Yeah.
Let's lay it out there and say, okay, God, now what?
Right. Because that's how we get ourselves to the point of saying, God, once again, and I think you even mentioned this in this week's message, this past Sunday, of you got to get to that point of saying, God, not my will, but yours be done. For me to get to that point, though, I have to be honest with what it is. Because think about this: when you have a little kid and maybe you go in their room at night and they're afraid, and you say, well, what is it? What are you afraid of? And they start telling you whatever it is that they're afraid of. And most of the time it's some made up thing that as an adult you go,
right,
like what? And maybe it's that cliche of the monster in the closet or the thing under the bed, well, as soon as there's an easy solution to some of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, well, let's turn the light on and look in the closet and see what's there. Let's get under the bed. Let's see if there's anything under the bed. And whenever we're dealing with a child that has some of those, and we can turn a light on, we can say, okay, let's talk about this through some sound advice here from mom or dad of saying,
right.
Well, I don't think we really need to be afraid of that.
Yeah.
I don't think we really need to have that as a concern. Reason is tough in that moment, but when you can turn a light on and really show, and sometimes it's just your presence in the room.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, well, I got to crawl up here in bed then for a minute with you,
mm-hmm.
and let you know that when I'm here, you don't have to be afraid. That is the exact same thing that we do with God. When we're being honest with God and God's going, what are you afraid of? And you go, well, God, what about this? And what about that? And what about this scenario over here? And what about the worst case idea here? And God's going, okay, let's turn the light on these things for a second.
That's good. That's good.
And sometimes it's just recognizing, okay, God, you're here with me. Mm-hmm. It's just that presence to say, when you get honest with God, God also can get honest with you about some situations, and God can help you understand, okay, this is a time of growth. And growth is uncomfortable. So it's okay that you're uncomfortable right now.
Right.
But it's that honesty in that face of fear. That's one of the ways then that we're able to battle that fear back and say, yeah, that was crazy that I was afraid of that.
And if we will confront it honestly, that gives us an opportunity to address it. Mm-hmm. Because that's, you were talking earlier about, some of the fears you had and having somebody that talk you through it. And so all of a sudden there may be something we can do. You said, turn a light on. It might be, what is the next step? Let's do something. Yeah. That's kind of my thing about confronting my fear. It's not just about saying it out loud. Let's do something about it. Mm-hmm. What is the excuse? Because we really like using fear as we like using an excuse, and we just don't know that it is the fear. Yeah. One of the things that you had said and put in our notes, I thought this was really cool. The fear sounds spiritual. Yeah. Let me pray about it. Yep. Wait, what? We're asking you to do something that'll help people and love people. You have the time, you have the resources, blah, 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 blah. What is the reason? What are you praying about? Right. And so
You're
sometimes
for God to tell you it's not.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly. I'm praying that if I pray long enough, I'll come up with a good excuse. That's right. I can't do it. And so that literally takes us right to this point where not only just put your fear out there honestly, but be honest enough to say, hey, I think I might be disobedient at this point. Mm-hmm. What you said earlier, if God has called me to do it and I'm not doing it, I'm getting real close to rebellion. Yep. I mean, let's if you tell Kendall, son, you need to clean your vehicle up. Yep. I saw it. You're not taking care of it. Clean it up. And he does that. And a week later, and remember, he cleaned it up. Yeah. And a week later, it's dirty again. And you tell him again, at what point is it no longer he's just not thinking about it and being messy? Right. He knows what you want him to do. And at some point, Mr. Terry is going to look at his son Kendall and say, son, you're being pretty rebellious at this. Yeah. It's the same with us. Mm-hmm. If we know God wants us to do something and we don't do it, it's straight up disobedience. It's rebellion, and we need to lay that before God and say, God, I'm going to need you. I'm going to need you to help me.
Right. Because the answer to being separated from God is the cross, and it is salvation, and it is being real in that moment of, I need something else to help me here. I can't do this on my own. And, when that guy, when I was having that conversation about this trip that I was wanting to go on and was thinking about going on and realizing all the reasons not to go, one of the easy things, sounds very spiritual, we don't have the money. I knew where my parents were financially. I knew where I was in college financially, and we didn't have the money.
Need to be more responsible.
And we started talking about, well, how can you get the money? What are some ways to stop being disobedient to the call here and say, well, what resources do I have? I started sending out some letters to family members and different things. And it got to the point, it was wild. It was almost comical that I would go to the mailbox and open the mailbox, and there was another check. I had a church take up an offering for me. I didn't even know this church hardly. They heard I was wanting to go on this. They knew I needed assistance. They took up an offering one night, sent me a check. My mom told me she had went over her grandfather's house, my great-grandfather's house, and he had a jar sitting out on the counter, and everybody would come in there. He'd say, Kendall's trying to go on this trip to China. You got to put some money in that jar before you leave.
Right.
And stuff started happening, but that happened whenever I put aside the disobedience of saying, well, I can sit here and say, well, it sounds good to say, well, I ain't got the money. I can't do it. I can't make this happen. It'd be too much of a financial burden on my family. And said, okay, recognize that there may be some lines here for you to get this thing, make this thing happen, if you're willing to stop being disobedient to the thing that God has put in front of you to do and say, okay, God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and go get my passport. I don't have the funds yet to make this. I'm going to do the
things I can do.
But I can go get my passport. I can go get the picture taken. And at that time, I think we had to go to like Walgreens and get a picture taken in front of the screen.
And then take
Walgreens,
it over to Knoxville.
Get the little tiny image, and put it on the paper and all this. And it was, let me do what I can do then and see how God's going to show up. If I don't do this, then I sit and go, well, God didn't miraculously show up in this scenario. And God's going, I was going to do something.
Yeah.
If you would have just done your part. And we have to stop being disobedient to the thing that God has called us to do and start taking the steps that you have to take to make it happen and give God then the opportunity to do the miraculous. And I think that's what would have happened to the children of Israel. We saw it when Joshua takes over 40 years later, but whenever Moses was there with the people of Israel, I think if they would have just taken that step,
of course,
I think God would have done a miraculous thing in the face of fear.
Well, he didn't change his mind in 40 years.
Right. And in 40 years, when they walked over there, guess what was still there?
Yep.
Fortified walls were still there. Groups of people were still there. Giants were still in the land. And what's wild is when you read that about Joshua and you start reading what God was doing, people that should have caused Israel to be afraid would start saying, well,
here comes Israel.
Here comes Israel. They were afraid of this group of wanderers in the desert.
Yep.
They had the fortified wall. And the reason they were afraid is because God was doing miraculous, and they knew that they were going to lose that battle.
And isn't it sad that other people believe God's promises more than we do?
Yes.
And that's the other side. At some point, we just need to believe that God is going to protect us, that he's going to do all the opposite of the first part of this podcast, all the opposites. God does have a plan. Yes. He is going to protect me. He does have some principles in place if I would follow all of these things, and he backs it up. It's not blind faith. He backs it up with Scripture. I'm not going to read all of them because I got excited on Sunday when I was just reading them.
Yeah.
Just reading them over and over. And I can't tell you how many times I will just send a random scripture to a friend, maybe somebody I've not even talked to in a long time, and it's either a proverb or a psalm that has a strong promise in it, and the response is always the same. Man, I really needed that.
Yeah.
And that's good, but for me, and I don't say this because not everybody's the same way, but for me, that's why I read the Word every day.
Right.
The reason I read the Word every day is so I can be encouraged, so I can hear His promises again. And that is, I mean, we need to do this over and over and over, repeat them. I think it was the next week we talked about rehearsing, God's promises, but it's the same thing.
Yes.
Don't just believe it. You need to rehearse it to where it becomes natural to you.
Yep. And that's why we practice in every part of life. Why do we practice? It's because when you do it enough and you get out there in something that is now competitive, you know how to do it. Why did my coach in basketball want me to shoot free throws all the time? All the time. I mean, we would shoot free throws at the beginning of practice. There would be times we'd be in the middle of drills and we'd stop and do free throws. We'd get to the end of practice, we had to do free throws, and he's harping on us of what's your routine? Right. What are you doing? You don't have to do the same thing that everybody else does, but when I watch you shoot free throws, there better be a process that happens, because that's free buckets, right? Like in a basketball game, pros should not miss a free throw. That's I have an issue.
I don't think we have time to go down this rabbit hole because but it's my, the coach, and he, like I said, he wasn't making me do the same repetition that somebody else did, but he had me like, okay, you're going to put your foot on the nail. If you shot free throws, there's a nail there. Where are you going to put your toe? Are you going to dribble 2 times? When I was a tennis player, we do the same thing with serving. And when I'm coaching kids how to serve, it's what's your pattern that you're going to do. I can show you mine. I'm going to dribble this ball 3 times with the racket. I'm going to put my body in this position. I'm going to throw here. Why? Because when you get in the middle of a game and the heat of the day is on you on a court, or the crowd is pumping in a gym or whatever, you have to go back to something that makes sense, so that you have a chance to get this thing in play, to put this ball in the basket. That is relying on the promises of God. And the only way to do that is to have it in your heart. You have to know them.
You have to do it.
Yes. Several months ago, we talked about, I had read this article. If you want to build confidence in your youth athlete, then they need to be competent in what they do. Praise doesn't build confidence.
Right.
Praise just makes them feel good.
Right.
Competence is what builds confidence. And competency in the Word of God is what's going to build that confidence. And it takes us to the next one, where we just need to be closer to the Lord.
Yeah.
I think the coolest part about this whole message was the fact that the difference between Joshua and Caleb and the other 10, according to the Scripture, and I'm actually going to read it.
Yeah.
It said that not one except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and this is Numbers 32:12. You can go back and read it. And Joshua, except for these 2, they followed the Lord wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
There was a part of them that were too close to God to give up.
Yeah.
They were so close to God, it just didn't know, we can do this. We can do this. God said it.
And I love the word. Caleb comes up in multiple experiences there with them out in the wilderness. But I love Joshua and Moses, because when Moses would go into the tent of meeting to actually encounter the words of God, and during that, we don't have time to get into all of it, but it was during that time that Moses is actually writing Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus, like the stuff that we call the beginning of the Bible, right, was written because God was revealing things to Moses in this intimate setting. And it says that Joshua was there. And then Moses, because Moses is the one that's getting all the, like, doing all the things and saying the stuff and leading the people. And it says Moses would lead the tent of meeting and Joshua would stay in the tent. Joshua knew what it was like to hear God's voice.
Sure.
He saw God do these miraculous things. He saw God, and he had, I don't know whether it was just a more intimate time. I don't know what was going on. But Joshua knew and understood something, that whenever he saw the same thing that the other 10 saw, him and Caleb looked and said, God's got this. Yeah. Let's do this.
I heard God speak it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of the way I heard God tell Moses.
That's right.
We can do this. And so if we don't and wholeheartedly follow the Lord, we just have to cultivate that relationship closer and closer and closer. And I think I might have preached this backwards, but there was a purpose to it for the altar. But the last thing I talked about is surrender your life to Christ.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, surrender your life to Christ. To live as Christ, to die as gain. That's Paul said that. And for the longest time, I didn't understand it. The older I get, the more I understand it even better. Paul was just saying, hey, if y'all want to kill me, that's cool.
That's right.
If y'all want to kill me, that's cool. I'll just go be with Jesus.
I know where I'm going.
But if you're going to let me live, I'm going to live for him.
Yeah.
And that is, I don't know. Sometimes I get in the middle of the week, and it's not that I have to remind myself that I'm living for Christ. I have to remind myself why I'm living for Christ. And for me personally, I know I'm going to heaven. I know we have talked about this over and over. People probably get tired of this part, but I know I'm going to heaven. What the pressure, I guess, that I feel is I've got to take people with me, and getting them to understand that surrendering your life to Christ is the only feasible answer to life.
Yeah.
It's the only feasible answer to having a real life on this earth is to live it for Christ.
Absolutely. And I love you see this, I'm not going to say lack of fear, but everybody has whatever, but we just talked about Joshua and Caleb. Well, Joshua was the one that goes into being the leader of the people. Like he's the successor of Moses. But I love Caleb's. You see his heart.
Oh yeah.
When they go into the promised land, because he's old at the point, right?
Yes.
I mean, he's an old man by the time they get into the promised land. Because 40 years they wandered around in the desert for everybody else their age to die.
Yeah, all of his friends were dead.
Everybody dies except him and Joshua.
Yes.
And they go into the promised land, and there's a point where Caleb speaks up and says, that's what God's promised me, and I'm going to go fight like I was a young guy.
That's right.
And he takes the territory that he knows that God has given him in his old age.
It kind of reminds me of Clint Eastwood in some of these movies recently. He's just this old man trudging along. I'm doing this.
That's right.
I'm doing this.
And it's because he had surrendered his life. It wasn't to Christ because Christ hasn't been, wasn't there at this time in history, but it was his surrender to God. And God's plan and God's purpose and God's vision. And he kept it through 40 years of wandering around the desert. He kept it, and he waited for his moment. And he said, that's mine. I'm taking it. In my old age, I'm taking it. And he held on to it, and he continued to battle back the fear and battle back the what ifs, battle back are you sure about this? All of the people are dying. Everybody's dead. 20 years old and older when they went in are all dead now. And him and Joshua are still around to walk in. And it's because they had that lack of allowing the world, allowing the imagery, allowing whatever to get them off of God's plan.
Well, once you surrender your life to Christ in that way, then he becomes your identity.
Yeah.
And people are no longer, when they speak against you, if your life is completely surrendered to Christ, then when people speak against you, they're speaking against Christ.
Yep.
That's a strong statement. This is who I am now. It's that new creature. It's all of those things. And so becoming that person that I don't care what they say. I mean, man, how cool would it have been to be around Caleb at that time? Like, I don't care what they say. Do you realize everybody else is dead? Yeah, but God gave me a promise.
That's right. God told me I was going to walk into
I know a few of those people.
Yeah,
I know a few of those people. I've known a few of those people.
They're pretty amazing to be around, and just to hear that confidence, and you go, man, how are they living the life they're living?
Yeah.
That's it.
It's Christ.
It's Christ.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Thanks for listening to Living Out 180. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share it with someone so they can enjoy it too. Learn more or join us at 180churchtn.com. We hope you have a wonderful day.